Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Genes.
Welcome to CutOff Genes, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA and elevates the voices of adoptees who are woefully misrepresented in the public narrative about adoption. I'm Julie Dixon Jackson, a domestic infant adoptee and NPE, as well as a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie. So, hi guys, I am all by myself here. Today is mainly story time with Monica Hall, and so I didn't want to force somebody to get on microphone with me just so that we could chat. And I'm tired, frankly. I'm tired. A couple housekeeping things. Well, not housekeeping things. This is actually news. I want to thank Carolyn Curdy for drawing my attention to this little nugget regarding original birth certificates in the United States. On July 1st, 2024, Minnesota will become the 15th state in the United States to affirm or restore the right of all adopted people to request and obtain their own original birth records, or OBC. Here's what the new law does, plus how and when Minnesota born adoptees and their families can apply for a copy of the original birth certificate. Does this mean I can now get a copy of my own original birth certificate in Minnesota? Yes, it does, but not until July 1st. Duh. Does the new law apply to all adopted people born in Minnesota? Yes, all Minnesota born adopted people who are at least 18 years of age will have unrestricted right to request and obtain their own original birth certificates, no matter the date of birth or the date of adoption. While current law uses a complicated intermediary process involving two state agencies and the child placing agency that handled the adoption, the new law eliminates almost all of that red tape. Instead, the adult adopted people will apply for the original birth certificate directly through the Minnesota Department of Health. That now means that once this law goes into effect, in the United States, there will be 15 states that offer unrestricted access to adoptees to a copy of their own original birth certificate. Unrestricted means nobody can stop you. You don't have to go through a court. Biological family can't put up walls, can't veto anything. This is your right to have. 15 states out of 50. Imagine. Okay. There are 19 states, I guess 18 now, because I think that was what originally Minnesota was compromised. And by compromised, an adult person is discriminated against in obtaining a copy of their original birth certificate. Vetoes can be put in place by the biological parent, to where their names would be redacted from the original birth certificate, which would basically be useless again to the adoptee because that's the whole reason they want to get it. Or they have to go to court, and very rarely are courts going to let somebody have their birth certificate, specifically if somebody has filed a veto. There are 18 states left, and those are all restricted, meaning nobody is allowed to have their original birth certificate unless by a court order, which is, again, very difficult to get, or in some states, written consent or death of birth parents listed on the record. Nice. Anyway, I have a little more news about this that I will talk about at the end of the podcast. Oh, I wanted to let you guys know something fun that I did in the last few weeks. I have a relative. Let me see, what was she? I think she was a first cousin 3 times removed, named Hilda Mary Sides, and she was quite a celebrated watercolor artist in England. She was born in the, I think, 1870s, 1871 maybe, and died in the 1940s, I want to say. And she was actually quite a celebrated watercolor artist. And I've seen a lot of her work online and have looked into where I could find some of it. Very difficult to find. It is on auction sites and stuff like that, but none of it ever seems to be active, like it's already sold. But I found one on eBay, and it's actually one of my one that I really like. Some of her stuff, she was best known for her paintings of Athens, actually, of Greek ruins. That is probably her most celebrated work. But the stuff that appeals to me visually is just her paintings of the British countryside. And I was on eBay and I found a painting through a dealer that is in Rhode Island, and he actually had one of her originals, and it's already framed in a beautiful frame, and he's a art dealer, and it was for sale at little more than I was prepared to pay, but I wrote him and explained my relationship to this artist and asked if he'd be willing to take a lower bid. And he wrote back to me and said, "How can I resist an actual family connection?" Of course. So I finally have an original painting by my first cousin, 3 times removed, Hilda Mary Sides. And it's a really beautiful painting. It feels very special to me to own that. So yay me. You can find a video about it on the TikTok. If you're enjoying Cut Off Jeans, please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Okay, so now we are going into this week's story time, which obviously is going to take up the entire episode. This is Monica Hall, who is an adoptee, a birth mother, and an author. And here is the conversation I had with her. Enjoy. Hi, guys. I have on the line Monica Hall. Hello, Monica. Welcome to Cut Off Jeans.
Hi, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. Monica, I have discovered recently that she has written a book entitled, tell me the title. I know it, but I want to get it right.
I mean, it's one of those odd titles.
Yeah.
Practically Still a Virgin.
Okay. And it is about your experience as an adoptee and as a biological mother. And would love to hear your story and as much of it as you would like to tell.
I'd be happy to.
Okay.
I'll start off by saying the book is called an adoption memoir. However, it deals with an awful lot more than adoption because there's lots of family dysfunction. I think a lot of people just, have a family dysfunction in their past. I just happen to have an awful lot of it. And so initially my daughter asked me to write. And so she was, pregnant with my grandson who's now 8. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Write a memoir? Why? I mean, it was just it was a weird thing for her to ask, for her, like it just off the, but I think I intuitively knew I was going to write because I've been, carrying around all kinds of, journals and appointment books as early as 1968. So there was definitely an intuition that this stuff you just can't make up. You can't make this up, So, and my kids had moved out, but really, and I don't think that to me, being an adoptee and having my experiences in that was a normal life for me. That was not anything unique. To others, they thought it was unique. But to me, I didn't know anything else. So to me, it wasn't horribly interesting. And I'd lived this life and I'd had the reunions and I'd done all these things. But my daughter thought it was interesting, that other people would think it was interesting. But when she asked me to write, that's not what I wanted to write about. What I wanted to write about is the things that I didn't understand. Like there were things in my childhood and my adolescence that didn't make sense. There were mysteries to uncover. And I just never, I had a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of difficulties. I guess they are called traumas. And I just moved through them. I just pushed aside and let's just keep going. Let's keep going. And that was how I dealt with trauma. And so when it came to, her wanting me to write, that's what I wanted to write. And it took me 8 years because there was so much that I had to go through to get to the nitty gritty. So I actually have 2 books. The second book probably be published next year because there was a lot of investigation in that. It involved courthouses and police records and made some FBI. I mean, all kinds of things that I really needed to know. And I got my answers. And it was a real dark, hellish time, parts of this. And so a lot of that has been removed, and that's in book 2, but enough is in this book that really, I mean, there was some major healing that I was able to extract by writing. And I started writing because my daughter wanted me to, and I had these questions. And then when it got really, really dark, I had been raped as a virgin. And I had at 15 and had always felt like it was my fault, always felt it was my fault. And I would talk to people, or I'd mention it once in a blue moon. Like I never told my parents, I never told anybody about all those things that were happening. But I still, when years later, I would mention that, I had a date rape or whatever, and then I'd feel sheepish because that didn't really feel right either. And I just never could get my head around it as a kid. And back then, I was born in 1957. So the narrative back then was, somebody that had beat you up in a dark alley and you had a bloody lip and ripped clothes. That was rape. Not somebody that you knew or used to know, or, you had to have all those things happen. And I didn't get hurt. So, I just felt like it was my fault. But so I think that was the dark, dark, dark time of writing, because I was 60 when I went through those. That was about a year. And on the other side, it's not my fault. Like I was writing and I dig my memories, and then people would walk me through it. And then it's not my fault. I can see it. I can see it with the adult mind. And then, because if it happened to anybody I knew or my daughter or anybody, there was no doubt in my mind. But I kept going back to my child mind. And I did that with a lot of stuff from my childhood, a lot of stuff. And so I did get on the other side of that. And man, talk about freedom. I didn't know that I needed to be free from that. I had no idea. It was just something I just lived with and I just moved on from. So, this memoir, it is about adoption. It is about family dysfunction, but really what it's really about, it's about love. That's what it's about. It was written about love. In fact, the beginning, it says for Mary, and that's the daughter that I relinquished.
Okay.
So it's kind of a love story, and it's it was coming of age. And I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. So, and during the oil boom, which was, most people don't know what kind of time that was, but it was wild, wild west. It was a lot of crime. You had all this money. When you have money, you have crime. You have gambling, you have prostitution, you have the mob, you have Hell's Angels. People showed up, and even Alaska to an extent, even back when my parents went up there. Why do you go to Alaska? Well, it's new beginnings, or let's hide, or let's make a start, or we don't want anybody to tell us what to do. There's hardly any law, or, so you got a different soul up there anyway. And so I was born in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And I was born and I was relinquished for adoption, I think, as within a few days of my birth. And I ended up in a foster home, but my parents adopted me. They were living in Alaska. They're from California, but they've been living in Alaska since 47. And they pulled me out of a home of a bunch of babies, picked me out. I was special because I got picked. my paperwork, what I remembered my mom saying is that there were 6 babies in the house, but I'm opening this binder right here that you
Yeah.
can see, but nobody else can, but this is huge binder. And it says, as a big bumper sticker on the front, fluorescent, it says adoptees have mothers too, TWO, it's Alma, Adoptee Liberty Movement Association. And so in 1980 is when I started searching, and I have, I don't know, letters, I have files under facts, hearsay, journal documents, all the letters that I wrote, every single letter that came back, photocopies, lists of numbers that I call, and that's my search binder. And you know, that's before DNA. We had to do it the old way, the old investigation. I think there's a part of me that really loves to investigate. And I think that that's an adoptee thing.
Absolutely. It is.
We want to know, like, the things that I wanted to know in Alaska. Who was that guy with a knife? What was going to happen to me? Who was this? Why did he do that? You know, all those things. Why was my father the way he was? Why was my mother? Why did my mother protect me? All those questions. And I got as many answers as I'm probably ever going to get. So they took me to Alaska, and I was told that I was special. I got to, you know, my bedtime stories were that your mommy loved you, your other mother loved you so much that she wanted you to have a mommy and a daddy, and that she was selfless.
Right.
And I don't remember my mother telling me that my birth mother loved me, but my mom, before she died, just a little over 4 years ago, you know, and I was writing my memoir for, you know, quite a few of those years that before she died. And she said, I think one day when I was little, I said, I know what you're going to tell me. You're going to tell me my mother loved me. So she must have told me that a lot, because I don't remember it. But I don't know if that's why I never doubted my mother's love for me. I don't know. Or if that's just the way I'm wired. But I never doubted my birth mother's love for me. I never doubted my mother's love for me, although, and I know she did love me, but I know that there was a big complex thing with my adopted mom. And
Can I ask you a question?
sure.
When did, for me, being told that was like, well, love means abandonment. Love means you can give, that doesn't mean that you get to stay with who you love. That's the way I broke it down in my head.
So I don't think I was ever deep enough.
Okay. Okay.
to identify that. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not shallow. I'm complex, but I am not deep. There's not a
That's
lot.
funny. That's funny. Yeah.
But so what I did is I don't think I ever felt. So yes, I had extreme self-esteem issues and low self-worth. Absolutely, from the beginning.
Me too.
Yeah. I had no idea that had anything, or nor do I have proof now that it had anything to do with my adoption. I do know that adoptees have 4 times more likelihood of drug addiction, getting pregnant out of
the
wedlock.
Drug addiction's higher. That's the 4 times more likely is the suicide.
Drug addictions.
The other ones are higher. The addictions and
I would like to know these numbers because I'm a recovered alcoholic.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
an addict.
We have a very, very high existence in the addiction communities.
I don't think I ever put those together.
And
I didn't know that I had adoption trauma. I had no idea.
Right.
I just knew I felt bad. And I don't know if it's because I do know that being relinquished absolutely had a lot to do with my low self-worth, but there was a lot of other factors involved.
Yes, of course.
And my family should never have been able to adopt. I don't know that my girlfriend that I grew up with up there, or ran with, I should say,
Mhm.
she was a juvenile delinquent like me for a bit. And she said, you know, your parents they would never been able to adopt. They wouldn't been able to pass a psych evaluation or a background check today. My father was sexually, uh, I don't know. I always felt like I didn't have any conscious memory of abuse, sexual abuse,
Mhm.
but I knew that my dad had feelings for me that were not appropriate. There was
Yikes.
absolutely no doubt.
Mhm.
There were some things that were absolutely horrific experiences that I had with my father, that are in my book, that really changed the way that my trajectory. And that's when I became a juvenile delinquent. And
Sure.
just as bad as I could be, I felt, you know, I didn't do well in school. I had attention problems. And I believe I might have had learning disabilities, but I definitely had trouble with math and paying attention. And if something wasn't interesting, I couldn't focus at all.
Yeah. Yeah. If it wasn't something that I don't know about you, that I hated history, and I
Mm.
didn't realize until much later, more recently, because I love history now because I know all my answers, but I couldn't place myself in it. I didn't know where I came from, so I didn't know who are my people. Who do I root for? Why do I care about this? And now I'm like, I come a compulsive historian.
Well, you're a genealogist, for God.
Exactly.
Come
Exactly.
on.
But and that was another thing because the assignment we all have in third grade, that have an effect on you? The one where you have to build your
I
family
didn't have
tree?
that assignment. I had a different,
Oh,
so I had a similar experience, but it was different. We didn't have that. You know, like I said, I grew up in Alaska and I'm probably older than you, and things were different. We were
sure.
hiding under our desks, you know, for earthquakes and for
Oh,
nuclear, you know, bombings and things
okay.
like that in the 60s. So,
Sure.
but what we did have, and I thought it was second grade. I'm pretty sure it was second. I don't,
Okay.
could have been third, but I'm pretty sure it was second. They passed out this test, something they'd never done before. It was very important. And you had to use your number 2 pencil to circle it, to color in the dots.
Uh-huh.
So it was probably a census. And I remember that
Oh,
it had some questions that I couldn't answer. There was absolutely no answer that was applicable to me. And it was something about, are you living with your real parents kind of question? Well, they were my real parents, but they weren't my real parents. I knew I
right.
had other real parents. I mean, what's real,
Yeah.
right? That was the beginning of my
What is real?
real. And so I went home. I must have told my mom, and I just remember my father being really angry. And I thought, being a self-centered, you know, second or third grader, that the problem was with me, and instead
Mm.
of their privacy being violated, or that maybe I got confused. I
Oh,
don't,
interesting.
but how I saw it is there was something wrong with me. And my dad went to school and made a huge fuss out of it, you know, over with the teachers and the principal. And I was humiliated. I wasn't there for it. I remember the teacher got called out of the room. I knew my parents had taken me to school and marched into the office. So that was and I think before that, I'd done really well in reading. We had those SRA
Okay.
reading blocks, you know,
Mm-hmm.
where they had cards and you get to go up another color and another level. And I was really proud of my reading level. And then after that, I just tanked everything. It was just always, I'm comparing myself to others.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't fit. I wasn't, I mean, it was just, it was a real turning point for me. And I
Um,
think that's when it started
okay.
happening.
Did your parents want you to keep your adoption a secret?
No,
Okay.
no, but I really think that thing that happened, and my dad running in and making a big deal out of it, and my mother and being angry, kept me from telling them other things that could have kept me out of danger.
Okay.
Oh, there were other things, you know, I couldn't trust them with
All
anything.
right.
right. I didn't feel like they had my back ever. I didn't feel like anybody had my back.
Mhm.
And I found friends that when I had an incident with my father, one when I was 11, one when I was 13, and one when I was 14. And then I was raped at 15. So it was a pretty
Ugh.
rough 4 years. The incident with my father when I was 11 just confused me. I didn't understand why he said what he said. And when I was 13 and I was taken out in a car ride and raged at horrific things, and just horrific stuff happened. And I know I have repressed memories. I have flashes of things. Um, and that's when the juvenile delinquent behavior started. I was very strong as a kid. I was very thin. I was like 103 pounds, but I was very strong. My upper body strength, my legs too, but I was just very strong. And I have a real strong personality. And I really wanted to fit in with the cool kids when I was in elementary school, but I wasn't cool because my parents were overprotective. And the cool kids, had a little bit of freedom and I didn't.
Right.
And so by the time junior high, I just snuck out my window and took LSD and sniffed glue and everything I could get my hands on, beat people up,
Mm.
took reds, and smoked pot. But it was really the psychedelics that I loved because I I never had a bad trip. I could talk people down that did, but I felt like it was an escape. It wasn't like a high like cocaine that I ended up having a difficulty with many years later. It was just everything was beautiful, everything was colorful, everything was light, everything. And so but the sniffing the glue or the spray starch or the Pam or whatever it was I was sniffing.
God.
I did. I wish I wouldn't have done that now because my memory sucks. But
I wonder if they're connected.
yeah,
There's a
probably.
good chance of it.
Yeah.
Also has to do with aging, I think.
Yeah, well,
That's why I
right.
do the crossword every day.
Well, you should, and
I do.
I should, but I don't. But I do sell software and I have to learn stuff all the time. So,
Mm.
and I wrote a book for heaven's sake.
Yeah,
So,
really.
but I think that there is so many things that just didn't line up and for me, and I didn't understand. I loved my parents. I loved my dad. I mean my dad was physically and emotionally and sexually abusive, but he was the one that came to my aid. He thought I walked on water. I was smart. I was outgoing. I was strong. I'd come home from school after getting suspended for fighting. Did you kick her ass? How? My mother would, how could you say that to her? And
Well,
like,
you were getting positive reinforcement
yeah.
for acting out.
And when I was little, so when I was 3, we adopted my brother out of Canada. And he was high need. He had all kinds of allergies. He was skinny. He cried all the time. My mother just had to put all her focus onto him. And I was kind of dropped.
Yeah.
And my father, what I didn't realize now, because had happened to me with 2 relationships, is I was love bombed.
Mm.
So I didn't know what that was, but now I do. I was love bombed. Like, you are so smart. You are so wonderful. I mean, he praised me and I needed that praise. And, I could beat all the boys at the races and I could take a handful of vitamins in one gulp, at 5 and like
Oh
a
my God.
horse size, I could take castor oil and without everything, because I would do everything to make him proud. I was strong. And I think and I was wired that way as well. And I think that was necessary to be able to survive all this shit so I could write about it and help others. Because the stuff that happened was pretty horrific. And so I always loved my dad, loved my dad. And when these things happened with him, I thought, and how I was wired, is there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. It was never, I can't stand it, or something wrong with him, or he's mean. It was always, there was something wrong with me.
Right, because he was the authority figure. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up thinking that everything my parents said was right because they were the adults. Come to find out much later that they didn't know jack. You know, and they said things to me that absolutely um uh informed my feelings about myself and what I thought about the world because of their warped opinions about things. Um, and that, but you know, that's what happens when you're raised by emotionally unintelligent humans.
And I think, we're not unique in, trauma or dysfunction. Certainly, we're not. In fact, the book that I wrote, I just launched last week. I've got already over 50 reviews, 5-star reviews, and the things that people are writing are just, I can sit and I can just read them and I could just hold my chest and go, oh my God. It's so beautiful because most of these people aren't adopted.
Wow.
And yeah, because we've all got stuff, and it doesn't have to define us. It doesn't have to take us down. We can survive this, and I'm proof of that. So yeah, I love my dad, and I did go through during 2020. I went through almost a year of Zoom with a therapist, and we did EMDR,
Oh.
eye movement reprocessing desensitization, because I wanted to extract some memories for sure. For sure, because I knew stuff happened. I had evidence, I had everything pointed to that, but I had some age regression hypnosis in the 90s, but I wanted to know for sure before I wrote it, and I felt like I was throwing my dad under the bus if I didn't. And so that was my original purpose of the EMDR. And we, going through the process, we determined I had 11 big T traumas.
Do you recommend it? I've been thinking about it.
Yes, absolutely, I do.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so those big T traumas, and that's why I say, during the intake, it was so interesting because she said, I want you to, and probably every therapist does a little differently, but this particular therapist, she said, I want you to pick a fictional mother, somebody that you would have if you could have any mother. Who would it be? And I want you to wait, tell me about it next Tuesday when we meet. And I didn't have to wait. In that moment, I knew without a shadow of the doubt that it was Mrs. Doubtfire.
Oh, interesting.
Because I remember in the 90s when I was going through therapy, and I was going through a workbook with a therapist called Courage to Heal Men and Women Survivors of Child Sexual Abuse. And I remember watching Mrs. Doubtfire, and this little girl jumping on her daddy's lap and climbing all over him and just loved him up so much. And then he became Mrs. Doubtfire. Man, nobody would mess with his babies. He would body slam them to the floor, or she would, or whatever, And I was so envious. I wished I had a dad like that,
Me too. Yeah.
And so when that was it, Mrs. Doubtfire. And then she took me on a guided imagery thing, and she said, okay, I want you to pick your spirit animal. And I thought, this is really corny, but okay, I'll go with it. And I saw an owl. I'm like, okay, it's an owl. So there's a number of really traumatic things that happened specifically with my father. One was very violent, and damn, Mrs. Doubtfire body slamming him to the floor. And then my adult Monica was in the room, who is the most powerful. And she's like, you son of a bitch, you leave her the fuck alone. You get away from her with that hanger. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then the owl is saying, honey, it's going to be okay. You're going to get through this. You're going to be very wise someday. You're going to help a lot of people someday. Wow. But the thing that I identified, because they take you through this list of how you feel inside about this certain big T trauma, And then you identify what that is. And for me, it was something's wrong with me. It was always something is wrong with me. Other people have different things. Mine was something was wrong with me. And so I went through 11 of these big T traumas. Of course, one was the rape, one was relinquishment. There was 11, like I said, and I got through those, and I did get enough memory, so I absolutely understand and know what happened. Everybody goes through different stuff, and
Yeah.
you know, some of my stuff was pretty horrific, but this memoir doesn't talk about any of that in this
Okay.
memoir.
Okay.
It
That's the
does
next one,
talk
right?
about it's the next one and some other stuff, but this one is it's very clear this girl's a survivor. It's very clear this girl's a survivor. And then she was a shit show. Oh my God. What a shit show. I mean, as a young teen, and you know, you can forgive a teen, you know, but then, oh my goodness, 20 years old or whatever. So I was adopted, and I always wondered about my mother, but I never really thought there was any hope in finding her because my parents had never mentioned anything that they knew who she was. I just figured they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got raped when I was 15, and my parents locked me up in the house. And I didn't tell them that I was raped. They probably thought I was promiscuous, and I wasn't. I was a virgin. And I couldn't tell them because I couldn't trust them with anything. That had been proven in second grade. And I knew they would have made a huge stink all over town, and I would have been humiliated, yada, yada. So they locked me in the house for those 6 months during the winter, and it was very lonely. And my friends didn't come over, and they wouldn't, you know, they kept me hidden so people didn't see me if we went to the store. I had to get in the car in the garage. I couldn't go to the store. I'd sit in the car while my mom went to the store. And we were very Catholic, so sometimes she'd take me out of town to go to church where no one would see us that we knew. And I was taken to see a nun to relinquish my child, my only known relative, my only known blood relative.
Ugh.
And I remember grooming the nun to let me see my baby. And they didn't at the Catholic hospital. But I groomed her. I told her, you know, because I didn't have any identity. I had no identity. I had no idea who I was. And so I did get to see my daughter in the hospital and hold her, not a lot. They put me at the very other end of the ward, which I didn't realize until I started writing why it took so long to get down to the nursery. It's because I was at the other end with the women that were having hysterectomies. And then I left her. And my world went very dark after that. It was very dark. And we moved 9 months later to Sacramento, where I live today. I live in a suburb of Sacramento called Fair Oaks. And I had to go to school here, you know, that we moved down in June, and I started summer school because I'd missed so much school, being pregnant and traveling. My parents traveled a lot before we looking for a place to live through California when I should be been in a junior in high school. And then, you know, I told one girl about my baby. You know, she was less than a year old, one girl in my neighborhood. And by the time I started school, everybody knew that I'd had 4 kids and 3 abortions, and I was a slut, and it, you know, actually lived next door to the high school right now. And I was bullied and pushed around in the courtyard at the beginning of school, and they shoved a banana cream pie in my face and called me a slut. You know, I was pretty, and the girls didn't like that, and the boys did. And so I didn't even know anybody yet. And it was really hard, but you know, and I didn't want to be a fighter anymore. I had changed after being locked up with my Catholic mother. And I didn't fight back, and I'm glad I didn't. And then because I had changed, you know, I through all the things that happened, I gained some empathy for the people that I'd hurt. And I'd beaten a lot of people up in Alaska. I was pretty much of a wrecking ball, breaking into houses and bullying people and beating people up behind Tasty Freeze and at the movie theater. Oh God, it was just awful. And so I wasn't until I was 19 when my father died that I started drinking. I had, I smoked pot when I went to high school here, but I had never really had a drink until 19. And alcohol was my savior. I was at the bar. I was driving drunk, one eye covered. I think I was a practicing alcoholic within 30 days. I don't even know. It was very, very, very quick.
Wow.
And I learned that I could drink in the morning and I would get rid of my hangovers, that I could go to work. I was in sales and I slept around. I was looking for someone to love me. That's all I was looking for somebody to love me. And they would never, I'd sleep with them and then they'd lose my number, or never call. And it just was a spiral that ended at 21 when I got what I think today was viral hepatitis or probably alcoholic hepatitis from binge drinking.
Oh.
I got really sick. My skin turned yellow. My eyes turned yellow. I couldn't get out of bed. And I recovered from that. And when I recovered from that, I started looking for my birth mother. And that's when I was 23 when I went to my first ALMA meeting, Adoptee Liberty Movement Association. And they had me make a binder, showed me how to create a binder, had a search plan on what to do. And there was this really lovely older couple, Howard and Millie, and they had helped their adult daughter find her biological parents. And they helped me. And then I went to San Jose and listened to Florence Fisher speak, who was the founder of ALMA. And I did a search and I found my biological uncle first. He was in Canada. And then I was introduced to he knew my birth father. And my birth father came and I met him at the plane with a camera crew. They filmed it. The news filmed it. And then they met us at our house later, a few days later, and interviewed us in our home. And that video is on my website, monicahall.com. And it's very scratchy because it was from a VHS, but and you can see my birth father. He was indigenous and he got off the plane cowering, probably because of the camera crew, because he was very, very shy and reserved, but apologizing for the color of his skin.
Oh my God. So
Canada was very prejudiced, and I have blonde hair today. My hair was actually quite dark when I was young. On the cover of my book, you can see a picture of me. Your listener can't see it, but I definitely have dark hair.
You look indigenous.
I look too, and my face is broken up like into pieces. I was shattered, but my little grandson, oh my goodness, the other day when I got my books, right, and it was sitting on the counter, and I showed him, or we were talking about it, and I said, yeah, because it looks like kind of like the Madonna, and then she's broken up with pieces, puzzle pieces. And I said, yeah, she was shattered. And he said, not here. And he touches his head and he comes over and touches my heart. And he said, it was here.
Oh my gosh.
No, I know.
Oh, he's a little old soul.
Oh my God. Yes.
Wow.
Oh my God. Anyway, yeah, that's it. My heart was shattered.
Yeah.
It was shattered. So, I repressed and pushed down that disenfranchised grief of relinquishing a child is, it's a weird thing because back in 73, which is when she was born, that was still closed adoptions.
Yeah.
And it was still very shameful. I wasn't allowed to go to school. I went to a pregnant girls' school with a bunch of other knocked up teens. I was almost the youngest. There was one that was 14. And then there was me. We were all going to relinquish except for one who was married. She was 17 and this was her second baby. First one she had relinquished. And yet she never talked about it. It's like something you don't talk about. It's like, it was a line in my book, it's like, war veterans. Yeah,
Yeah.
I lost a lot of friends over there.
Mhm.
They don't talk about it.
Right.
Yeah, I lost a lot of friends over there. I
Mhm.
had a girl. That's about as far as we go.
Mhm.
Because the touching of that pain and that grief, it's untouchable.
Mhm.
And that's why there's so many secondary rejections, because these women have had to go on and live with that.
They're
And
carrying it with them still. Plus, everybody around them was telling them how ashamed they should be and how they are not good enough to raise this child.
unworthy,
Yes. Yes.
unworthy, better people.
Mm-hmm.
Better people could,
Yes.
and that's how I felt, these parents that were going to take my baby, they had money, they were so much more worthy, they were smart, I wasn't, I had this low self-worth.
Right.
And then also, disenfranchised grief, it's like, an abortion could be a disenfranchised, you don't talk about it to people.
Yeah.
Or even a divorce or
Mhm.
an affair. Those are all things that we can't like discuss with just anybody.
Right.
And then relinquishing a child, people assume because you relinquish that you made that decision that you don't care.
Yep.
So it's not like anybody brought a
Or
cake.
that it came that you made that decision on your own, or that you had any control over it.
Right. Well, of course I
Yeah.
didn't. I was 15,
Right.
but then, there's no closure. So there's no death certificate. There's no funeral, because that is a death. You've lost that child. There's no, you don't get a baby shower. You don't get a casserole or anything,
Mhm.
and so you just got to push it down and move on. And that's what I tried to do. But that ended up, I quit drinking for a couple of years when I got really sick. And then after I found my biological family, I started drinking again. And I went up to Canada and partied with them. My father lived in Edmonton by then. My mother's side of the family had moved to Vancouver, but they all were so much like me.
Mm.
My mother's side of the family was Indigenous as well, but my mother's father was mostly English and some Irish. And so he was white. And my 6 uncles were all dark haired. They definitely looked, mixed. In Canada, it's called Métis, which means half breed. But my mother had fair skin, light hair as a child, darker when she was, 22 when she relinquished me, and blue eyes. And I have hazel eyes and brown hair. I brown up, definitely brown up in the sun. Um, that dark brown, not the golden brown.
Right.
And so my mother did look light, and my granny was Métis, but my grandfather was English, and he was the one that was the alcoholic. He's the one with the high forehead. All my children have the high forehead, including me.
Me too. Everybody on my mother's side of the family has a 5 head. It's like, yeah. Yeah.
And I have the gift for gab like he did. And, my father's very reserved. All my siblings, they're and there was an awful lot of prejudice.
Yeah.
My dad growing up, for sure. I didn't even know that he could speak Cree until many years after our
Oh, wow.
many,
Wow.
many years. He was ashamed. And I have one of the recordings I have, I had one of those camcorders when they first came out, and I did film my reunion with my daughter at the airport when she turned 18. And I have a film of I'm taking all my children back to Canada to meet my biological family. And there's on the property, there's a big lake up north of Edmonton. And on each side of the lake is where my mother's side of the family settled and my father's side of the family settled. And every year in July, on the weekend of my birthday, there's a pilgrimage. And this pilgrimage, indigenous people come from all over North America for the healing waters on this lake. It's supposed to heal people. And it was called Manitou Sakahigan, which is Lake of the Spirit, which is Cree. But now it's called Lac St. Anne because the Catholics came, and so they have Catholic mass around there and everything. And the Pope was there 2 years ago to say he was sorry for all the residential schools and the bodies that they found of buried children. In Canada, it was awful. So there's a full circle. I've met my daughter. She lives in Michigan, and she's 50 now. I have 2 grandchildren. One's in college. The other one's in probably just starting high school. And then I have a daughter that I had here, the first daughter I get to keep. I met her father when I got sober. And then I had a son, and my son is 29. He's almost 30. So I've got a 50-year-old, a 39-year-old, and a 29-year-old.
Wow.
I could have kept having babies every decade, another decade, but I didn't. So what's pretty exciting, other than the fact that I published my book and that it seems to be helping a lot of people, not just adoptees, but lots of people, evidently. And it's a quick read and it's super fast. And I didn't know that it was, and I didn't know that it was going to be hard to put down. I just wrote it the way
that's so great.
Yeah. And so I got a phone call yesterday from some people that I had briefly met at a adoptee group here in Sacramento. I only went one time. And they said, hey, would you be willing next week to testify at the Capitol in Sacramento to testify 2 minutes as a birth mother and an adoptee to get open birth certificates for adoptees in California that were relinquished as children.
That's amazing.
And I said, oh, hell yes.
Yes.
Hell yes.
That's so exciting.
Oh, it is. And it's an uphill climb, but it is a beginning. It is an absolute beginning.
Absolutely.
During COVID, there have been so many adoptee books that have been written. They're coming out like crazy. Mine's just one of them. And they are so good, you guys. Anybody listening. So this one that just came out, sorry, you can't hear me. Who is a Worthy Mother? An Intimate History of Adoption by Rebecca Wellington. It's a beautiful book.
Yeah. I've heard of that.
It came out. It has a beautiful bird's nest with a little blue egg on the center
who was talking about that? Somebody was one of my guests a few weeks ago was talking about that one.
This one. I Would Meet You Anywhere.
I have read that.
Yes. It is so wonderful. And she was born, her mother was Japanese, and my son is a quarter Japanese. So I really enjoyed that. And then Relinquished, The Politics of Adoption and the Privilege of American Motherhood by Gretchen Sisson. Whoa.
Such
so good.
That's so great. I'm so glad you're doing this.
I can't even. You know how much I spent on books in the last month?
I know.
And the reviews I'm writing. Adoption Unfiltered, Revelations from Adoptees, Birth Parents, Adoptive Parents, and Allies.
That's the one.
Yes.
The one, Sarah is the one who talked about the other.
Yes. Yeah, that was good. So anyway, there's even more. Oh, You Should Be Grateful.
Yep.
By Angela Tucker.
Yep. Love Angela Tucker.
Stories of Race, Identity, and Transracial Adoption. Boom. I mean, those are just the ones that, wait, one more. Besides mine. Pulled by the Root.
Yep.
By Heidi. Heidi Marble. Beautiful.
So good.
Covered
so good.
Book. I mean, I've spent so much money. And then Practically Still a Virgin by Monica Hall.
Perfect. Perfect. And what a perfect way to end this conversation.
Good, right?
Yes. Monica, thank you so much for this conversation, for everything you talked to us about. I hope the listeners buy your book And thank you so much for what you're doing for our community, and best of luck talking at the Capitol next week. But by the time this airs, you'll have done it already. But and I know this is probably just the first step in a long battle that obviously we're
If it goes
continuously
well,
fighting.
I'll probably have to go back again.
Great.
So I'm gonna not be able to take any vacation. I'm gonna have to leave everything open.
Yep. Well, great. I mean, I love it. I love that for you and for us. So thank you so much. All right. Thank you so much, Monica, for that interview. Great conversation. Get her book, you guys. Another one of the great ones that I think is so important for everybody to read. And I have not read it yet. I'm going to be honest about it, but it is getting great reviews, and I think you can tell by our conversation that she's pretty from the hip, and doesn't sugarcoat things, which I always enjoy about people. This was a couple months ago that we recorded this, and she was going to the state capitol in Sacramento to testify as a adoptee and a birth mother, in the in SB 1274, the Equal Rights Bill that restores the right to California adopted people to request and receive a copy of their original birth certificate. Well, unfortunately, it is dead in the water. So it did not move forward. Let me see. Senator Susan Tellementes Eggman is the primary sponsor. The bill has been assigned to the Senate Health Committee and the Senate Judiciary. The bill was set to be heard on April 10th, but Senator Eggman pulled the bill before the hearing due to birth parent privacy, in quotes, issues raised by committee members. So that bill will not move forward. So our work in California is still cut out for us. That's a bummer, huh? And again, there's only 15 states now where adoptees are allowed their original birth certificates, 17 where limited access, and 18 or 19 where they have no access at all. Guys, I am out of here. I want to let you know, if you have been listening the past few weeks, you know that my husband is going through some health issues right now, and we're kind of locked down, dealing with that. And I may or may not take a little time away from the podcast as things progress. I know at some point when he has his bone marrow transplant that I will need to be taking care of him 24/7 for several weeks. And although that doesn't really mean that I won't be able to record, I'm just not sure emotionally how much I can dedicate to providing a good podcast during this time, because it's, as you know, it's a little overwhelming and it's a little daunting, and we have a tough road ahead of us. But I want to thank you all for your well wishes. I am not going away. I just might take a little break. If you would like to reach out, you know how to do it. Cutoffjeans.com. All things Julie Dixon Jackson there. Also join the Patreon if you would like. And I hope you guys are having a great early summer. And as always, the truth is in your jeans.